Welcome to Writing Nonfiction 101. Today, we're going to cover some of the strategies that you can use first for interviewing and secondly for organizing your research. So, let's start with the interview process. So, when conducting interviews for research, it's definitely a journey of exploration, a journey of engagement in meaningful ways. When we use interview as a research method, we're getting those firsthand experiences and accounts. We're getting the depth related to our research as well to understand the context of a challenge. Like, for instance, I did informational interviews to understand the context of criminal justice as it related to prison phone calls, to get an understanding what does a phone call mean to someone when they're incarcerated. That hello from a son, a daughter, a parent, a friend, is it significant? And I remember when conducting research and writing a particular report on this topic, someone referred to that phone call, which is oftentimes hard to obtain. In many jurisdictions, that call could be upwards of $15 to $30 at over $1 per minute. We knew that there were some challenges related to not only access and availability, but the challenge as it related to connectivity, broken relationships, and experiences of grief and loss as a result of these high costs and usury rates associated with prison phone calls. But the interviews really illuminated the issue when you talk about that a phone call meant life, that it meant connectivity, that it brought joy, that it helped on the journey of grieving, and that for many was one of the tools to help serve as a parent, to be able to be available for those early and memorable and cherished opportunities to watch their child grow. So, as I went on that journey of using interviews as a research method, it went beyond me just as a researcher identifying some of the challenges related to the high cost of prison phone calls, but it helped to shape the narrative around the importance of strong families and safe communities. And that one phone call could really make an impact in helping to foster connectivity beyond the gates of a prison cell. So when I give that as an example, I give that as an invitation to think very strategically as you go on this journey in nonfiction writing. Who would you like to interview? What would you like to learn from them? And how can you honor their story in meaningful ways? So, interview as a research method is an invitation for connectivity, for growth, and impact. So, how do we embark on this journey of interviewing? First, spend some time preparing your interview questions to ensure that the questions are open ended, to ensure that they are not working and built upon any type of assumptions or even bias. And what are some of the ways to make sure that your interview questions will be effective? One of the methods that I take on my writing journey, no matter what piece that I'm working on, is I love to work in teams. Why is that important? Because another person on my team may have a different perspective. They may have a different way of asking the same question. They may be able to impact some of the roadblocks and impasses that I could create if the question is not written appropriately. So, one thing that I do after I do all of my research, compile all of my questions, I always help myself on this research journey by connecting with others who have experience in leading research and doing and conducting qualitative and quantitative research so they can give me feedback as well. I know in the context, oftentimes, even as you're doing the review process of your book, you're looking for those beta readers to give you a sense of where you're going with your project, if the character development is working for you. The same is true for nonfiction writing. You want additional eyes and ears and perspective on how to do something effectively, like preparing your interview questions. And when I think about conducting successful interviews, I always remember it's not about me. It's about the history, the context, the people that I'm trying to gain a deeper understanding of their voice, of their culture, of their perspective. So oftentimes I'm anxious to run through a long list of questions. But what I soon find is that the interview participant is the guide. And maybe it's the follow up question that's the most important. Maybe it's a redirect of a completely different question. But I invite you and challenge you to be open to the journey of what you will learn in the process as well. So, admittedly, just for context on why I feel this way, I have always worked in projects where I am primarily serving as a participant observer, following those principles of ethnography and also influenced by the field of anthropology. I look for those moments to sit where the people sit, to understand their lived experience, to understand the context of the issue that we may be facing at hand. And that, for me, comes with connection, it comes with storytelling, it comes with engagement. And one of the scholars that I admire that was very effective on conducting interviews for research, of course, was none other than Zora Neale Hurston. And she did this in multiple ways, not only with the research that she published, but in addition to the documentaries that she produced. And overall, she modeled the essence of connectivity. She modeled the essence of respect. This is a key value that relates to interviewing, that you respect your participants, you respect their confidentiality, you respect their boundaries, and you respect the information that they're providing you, that you are carrying a sacred vessel called their experience, called their life history, called the essence of who they are. And if you're looking at the interview process, that you're ensuring that you're always cognizant of those pieces when you're interviewing to gather additional information about a person, about a place, or a time in history. In addition to conducting interviews, I want you to also think about how do you organize all these materials? So, for my first session, I talked about making sure that you're finding those accurate uh, resources, that you're ensuring the credibility. And once you find them, once you start and once you get a good rhythm, you'll start finding more information, even at sometimes resources that others haven't unveiled yet. And what that means is you have a responsibility to yourself and to the research to keep it well organized and well documented. So, what are some of the strategies? Of course, for me, I help to build out, I like paper copies of things in the sense of organizing physical documents, organizing historical texts, and even organizing my physical notes. So that means I typically have a multitude of research binders. Now, yes, I've started over time to evolve to make sure that I'm saving it on the cloud, to use initially Word documents for gathering the information and my research findings. But in the same way that I used to use that physical binder, I am using my online resources by creating tabs within my folders and organizing things based upon time. So I'm very specific on how I label a file as well. I'm ensuring that it has the context, if it's a draft or the final piece that I'm working on in the moment. I'm identifying where I got the information, even in the title, along with the date specification, so I can organize everything chronologically over time if need be, and also to be able to go through my research journey over a period of time. So, why is this strategy important? Because if someone calls and asks, for instance, can you tell me more about a particular research subject, whether it's about historical experience or about an individual from history? Of course, you want the ability to be able to say, here's where I found the information, here's where you can find additional information, and here is where this is the beauty of research for nonfiction writing. Here's some opportunities that we can work together to further explore this topic. You cannot do that if you don't have an organizational system around your research. But more importantly, to get to the next step of going from research to starting to outline your particular book or manuscript, you need to be able to get to the resources in a quick efficient, and comprehensive way. So, case in point, I have just a few of my recent books with me here. I'll just highlight this one, Focus on the Harlem Renaissance. On this particular book, I organized it, of course, chronologically. I started to look at what were the early migration patterns. How did people end up in Harlem? What was Harlem like before African Americans migrated there in a critical mass? Why the Harlem Renaissance? What gave birth to the arts and humanities coming together? And when we think about the Renaissance, a rebirth of arts and culture in meaningful ways, what was the excitement there? Why did people like Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, why did they come to Harlem? What were they looking for? What type of community did they build together? All of these questions were in my mind. And I organized this particular book initially chronologically to look at those patterns of migration. But then what started to emerge as well is the thematic piece. How do arts and culture shape history? And what does it look like? Not from the past, but what does it look like today? So all of a sudden, I was looking at where were all these spaces in present contemporary time, but also in the past, where people gathered, that they created their own cultural hub inspired by the arts, and who motivated them, who kept everyone organized, what did they learn from each other, how did they share information, all of these questions. And I started then to look around myself and say, in contemporary times, where do I see the same type of renaissance happening? And I started to think about my recent travels to Ghana and seeing how arts-based community development is helping to bring people together, whether it's related to fashion, if it's related to beading, the unique beading patterns that you see on bracelets and other necklaces and accessories, all these pieces. So, is it something that can be inspired? And is it happening around me again? So, of course, you're getting a sneak peek in the final chapter of the book. I start to talk about how those same pieces of arts and culture are bringing people together again as an extension of activism to tell your voice, to tell your story through meaningful ways, through the power of art. And how can art help to shape history, past, present, and the future? So you see, I combined two things, the chronological piece leading up to the Harlem Renaissance and the thematic piece on where we see arts and culture shaping communities today. Let me give you another example. These are two books from a series. This particular series is related to Black achievement, and one is Black achievement in activism. Once again, this has some very specific themes emerging that were thematic. Where can we see the power of activism, that community organizer, voice got power? Where do we see it today? Now, it does also include some of those chronological components because I wanted to make sure that as I was inspiring young people to find their voices, that I was demonstrating examples from the past and the present on how, if you use your voice and lift it for justice, you can bring forth meaningful change in partnership with others. Once you have that collective vision, once you identify your strategic action of what you seek to accomplish, and then, of course, unleash your moral imagination of the possibilities on how we can build more just and inclusive society. Now, this particular piece, Black Achievements in Business, this book, I served as a mentor for the author, and I helped the author organize, once again, the strategy around research findings. Where were the places where Black entrepreneurship was making a difference? Where was the innovation? What were some of the experiences? Was it just related in fashion, or was it related to food and culture? Was it related to television? You see Oprah Winfrey, you see one of the young as well, powerful Mosiah Bridges, and you see his creativity with his bow tie project. You see all of these pieces, and I wanted to make sure thematically that I was highlighting the young entrepreneurs that were emerging as young as 10, 12 years old to tell their stories on what they were doing to do what? To inspire other young people that you're never too young to make a difference, while also sharing and highlighting some of the people and the names that we already know and seeing the impact of their work in meaningful ways. So it mixed a bit of the thematic piece, but also it had some of that problem solution of when we say, can we create a stronger economy in the Black community? The answer is yes, we can. How can we do that? Through the power of business and entrepreneurship. And so it documented a problem because many research studies demonstrate that it will take over 2 centuries, nearly 240 years, to bridge the racial wealth gap between Blacks and whites. Problem, solution, who are the business leaders, the innovators, the disruptors that we call entrepreneurs who are willing to make a difference and help to create new pathways for economic liberation, economic growth, and economic development. So, what do we do with all of these pieces? We organize them. We create the opportunity to organize first the research findings, whether that's the news articles, whether you can find a documentation of oral history or previous interviews. We will organize all of those pieces. And then as we think about our outline, we will align each of those pieces with the outline of the book. So, case in point, if we're working on a leadership biography, we're going to organize the outline of starting with maybe birth. Where was the person born? What conditions were they born under? What motivated them as a child? What did they do as they became an adult? What were some of the accomplishments in their adulthood? So you can start to see how you can organize chronologically your book. It also could be thematic. Maybe you're talking about 5 authors from the Harlem Renaissance. What motivated them? Because you'll notice there's a diversity of artists who emerged in the Harlem Renaissance. It was not just writers or poets, there were sculptors, there were musicians. You have all these pieces coming together. Maybe you have that thematic piece that talks about what motivated them, what common message or theme were they trying to share through their artistry. And of course, this problem solution that you can start with. Maybe the problem is the untold stories on a particular theme. I mentioned Black achievement and activism. Maybe the problem is, how do you tell the story of a Black activist? Are there common stories that we know? Are there ones that we need to know? Are there contemporary stories? Are there young activists? Are there activists that are emerging even still yet today? And what tools do they need? Guess what? My Black Achievements book in activism covers all of those topics in a way that's engaging and inspiring to the next generation of activists. So, what can you take away from these tips? That it's important to have a system in place to organize your research findings, to make sure that you're organizing them both electronically and also, here's a tip as well, that you have all of your files backed up in some type of method, whether it's in the cloud, whether it's a separate external drive, because you want to make sure that you have a long-term plan for preserving your research findings and having access to them. Just as a quick recap, your outline, you can organize it chronologically. I gave you those examples from my biographies that I worked on. Thematically, to talk about a range of different individuals, topics, or places that all follow under a certain theme. And that other type of writing style and how to organize your book, the problem solution. So introducing maybe in chapters 1 through 5, the data related to the challenge at hand. Remember, I said the racial wealth gap. So maybe your chapters 1 through 5 documented from Reconstruction to today, where we are. And maybe then the solution is chapters 6 through 10, where you're talking about in Reconstruction, you had the Freedmen's Bank. Is banking a part of the solution that we need today? What would it look like? What lessons can we learn from the Freedmen's Bank? Is the solution more opportunities on financial literacy? What are the current strategies around teaching financial literacy? Maybe you highlight the states that have legislation around teaching financial literacy in the schools. So you're seeing then that you would organize around the initial issue, you would analyze that issue, and then start offering some strategies to create change. So I hope that you have found inspiration as you participated in this two-part series on nonfiction writing, that you can find the inspiration to know that you can begin your research journey, you can organize your research in meaningful ways, and then go to those next steps of drafting that outline, starting that book, and truly changing the world. Thank you.